What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Football Friday edition of Back Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. Hashtag on social media, Twitter, IG, at Rich Q and Q YouTube channel. You guys have been fantastic, engaging, going back and forth, the banter. We love it, the dialogue. Championship Sunday to help us break it down, a little Vegas perspective. A man that I would say is a veteran when it comes to understanding how sports betting and gambling works. Gary Greene, CEO at Bet Vegas TV Radio Network, and of course, Bluebook Sports Network. Ton of information football wise. I don't know. Do you sleep out there in Vegas? Do you have the vampire lifestyle? I mean, I would imagine 24/7, right?
Well, my friends call me Bubble Boy, so I'm pretty much in a bubble. I have actually two lives. So from September until college basketball Final Four, it's pretty much 7 days a week, a lot of 16, 17-hour days. But then I'm off for the rest of the year for 5 months. So a lot of people think, oh, that's great, you got all that time off. I say, yeah, well, when you were off every weekend, all the rest of the year, I was still working for the most part. But I love it. I mean, I'd be watching this sports pretty much a lot anyway, not nowhere near to the level that I'm doing now, but it's still fun.
Have you seen over the last 15, 20, 25 years now the influx of sports betting, sports gambling? I mean, I think ultimately every state it will become legalized, probably not Utah, and we know what's going on with Florida, right, with the Seminole tribe and the casinos and whatnot. But can you imagine this 20, 25 plus years ago where it was old school? You write it down, you make the call to your book, you open up the newspaper, have a cup of coffee, put your bet in. And oh, by the way, you can't call them afterwards if someone gets hurt 5 minutes into the game and all of a sudden say, can we reconcile my bet? That's a story for another day. But, sure. Did you imagine it would be like this 20, 25 years ago?
I'm surprised it took this long, to be honest with you. I mean, you had politicians, and of course, you brought that up. The Indian reservation places, those states are always going to struggle because they don't want it. So right. Without their approval, it might never happen. And it's a shame because California, I mean, it's stunning to me. California and Texas would be so gigantic of a huge market. I knew, I'm from New Jersey, and I knew that when I moved to Vegas, had New Jersey had betting, I wouldn't have moved to Vegas. I'm glad that I did because I'm not a big fan of winter. But the idea is that I knew New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania was going to blow up. There was no doubt in my mind because, I started betting at like 10, 11 years old. So it was a normal thing. Everybody could do it. They used to have they were called pools, which are now parlay cards in the casino. But everybody had access to that, and even if you were betting $10, $20, $5, you were in action. You had a little fun on the side, but once you get these states going now, you can see how quickly. I mean, I was stunned at how big Arizona got so fast. That wasn't. I'm close. I've been doing radio shows for 30 plus years, and I did big radio shows around the country. I mean, down south, big. They bet. Of course, back east, they bet. California, which is my number one market outside of, say, Vegas, gigantic big. Hawaii, very big into betting. But the California and the Texas not having it. Once they come on board, then it'll be maxed out pretty much. I mean, I knew Utah would never probably get it, but for the most part, I still thought this would have happened at least 10 years ago, just because of the income that could be made by each state.
Yeah, and that's the other thing you mentioned because we talked prior to today's show, and I was born in New York. I reside in Jersey. I'm 10 minutes outside Atlantic City. So with everything happening when the casino shut down for a little bit, for a couple months with COVID, everyone got into the stocks, or everyone decided, let me do online casino gambling, right? And then we got a little more educated with the sports betting, and when everything was legalized, and you look at the handle from New York, New Jersey, and how it's rivaling and competing to some extent against Vegas, it really is remarkable because you get the transplants back in the day from New York that would want to come down to Jersey. Then you would get the Jersey that would drive over to Delaware an hour or so down there to put in a and I say it in tongue in cheek, a parlay bet for football,
parlay
right?
Card.
To do that. But now the money that it's generating, and you mentioned for the states and whatnot, it is crazy. I think the one thing everyone now, you've been doing this 30, 35 years, right? I mean, it's your wheelhouse, and that takes a long time to acquire information, cultivate contacts, and understand everything. The one thing that bothers me is that I never pitch or will say I'm an expert.
Right.
I convey information, I make it opinionated, I give you stats, and then I give my best, maybe my thought, my judgment, maybe my prediction per se.
Sure.
Now all of a sudden, the old school guys like yourself, I'm wondering if you guys sit back and you're having a gin or a Manhattan or a cup of coffee in the morning. You're saying, what the hell are some of these young guys doing? Like, you can tell the guys that are just pitching crap, and then the guys that are genuinely like, hey, let me help you try to make some money. We're not going to be 65%. We're not going to be 55%. I'm not going to make you lose your bankroll. You're not going to lose your kids' college tuition. You'll have a little fun, but you'll understand be responsible. And it's all about money management. Now, everyone and their mother seems like they're a gambling expert.
Yeah, when I started doing it and then offering, I was a professional sports bettor. That's what I moved to Vegas to do. But when I started to sell picks to people and had them buy the picks, I mean, I wasn't expecting to do that. I gave away so much of the picks anyway. I did shows in all the casinos, and then I started doing a football betting magazine. So we had tons of information in that. And I would say to people, look, just use the magazine. We were giving it away in the casinos, 50,000 copies a week for free. So everybody unless you really snoozed, you could get there quick enough, you would get it for nothing. And even if you didn't, it was only $5 or $6 at the time. So you got tons of information, but that's the problem. Everybody's an expert, and it's just given to them. I mean, ESPN, all these different networks, even the books now, the FanDuels and the DraftKings. I mean, everybody's an expert right off the bat. I mean, you have one job, and you're 24, and then you're 25, and all of a sudden you had nothing to do in betting, and now you're quote unquote an expert in sports betting, and that's scary. I mean, it really is. I mean, I always tease people that, what would you do if a company came to you? And now I don't cook and I don't do the stock market, but if they came to me and they said, hey, Gary, we love your radio show. We'd like you to be, your personality's great. We'd like you to do a cooking show. We'll give you $1 million for 20 episodes. And a stock market show comes to me, or stock group says, listen, we'll give you $1 million for 20 episodes. Would you take the money? And I'd be like, but I'm not an expert, so how am I going to do it? But in all these instances, the people do it, and that's the scariest. And then, of course, all the pundits on the ESPNs, and everybody has a pick. And it's one thing to say you have a pick and everything, but the idea that it's just gotten crazy now, and the in-game betting and the prop bets, and people are coming on, they're giving out 22 bets on a show, and you're like, who can bet 22 bets? Who's betting that? Not an average Joe. I could, but most people don't have the bankroll for that. So that's the scary part of this, and I really am worried that there's going to be a lot of people, now that it's legal, a lot of people are going to lose all their money. They're going to lose their life savings.
Listen, I've seen it up close and personal with guys that I know that, they wanted to, promote themselves as sharp bettors and whatnot. But the problem was, some of these guys, I mean, I like to play blackjack. I'm a table games player, but you ask anyone that has sat down and with me, I'm extremely disciplined. I don't chase, I progress and bet. I don't sit there and lose 3-4 hands in a row with 15 or 20 or 25 units, and my fifth bet is a buck. I'm not doing that. I get a good shoe, good run of cards. I get the hell off the table. Fine. My other friends are poker players, and they're big time poker players. And I get it. There's that mutual respect. I tell them, don't ever sit down at a table with me tongue in cheek, because you're the worst blackjack players. But my point is, it's like anything else in life, right? You have to have a discipline for the craft, so to speak. And I run into a lot of young guys, 20, 21, 22, 23. They start to download the apps. They put their funds in, boom, boom, boom. They don't understand wagering requirements. They don't understand what the wallet is. They don't understand the proper documentation once they put the money and how they can withdraw the money. These apps don't want funds to sit on site. They don't want that. They want you to play through them. And I think a lot of these younger guys, if they had a little more patience, they were a little more tolerant, and they educated themselves a little bit, then they would understand what it really means to, quote, shop around, or jump from app to app, or get the risk-free, or get the deposit. They don't understand that. So then what happens? Their buddy says something, they fill it with $500. All right, let's just do this. I mean, when my friends and I, when we were in our 20s and we used to bet the NFL games, I kid you not, hand to God, we would on a Sunday grab something to eat, grab the coffee for some of the guys that were hungover, grab a little juice, grab a little water, get the sandwiches, newspapers, flip them open, start to talk about it here and there. Once you place the friggin' call, Gary, and the bet's in, that's it. Nobody was calling 5 minutes later saying, "Oh, yeah, do me a favor. Elway just nicked up his knee. Can I take a?" I mean, they would laugh you. They would hang up the phone. I mean, that's where everything's changed. But these young guys, they see people on social media. They see him pushing. They see him flash. It's always only winning tickets, mind you, never losing tickets.
That's Floyd Mayweather, number
and
one
think,
at that.
right? And they think they're going to be that guy, and it's unfortunate because yes, you can make money, you can have fun with it. There are select few that can do it for a living over 20, 30, 40 something odd years. But for most of us, it's you make a couple of dollars, that's great, right? I mean, the best way to never lose it is to not bet it.
Of course. And it's not just that you could be, I can't just be a winner just because. I mean, again, it's disciplined 16-hour day work too. But as you said, the discipline, the money management, it's a long road. Most people, when you're betting with, say, a bookie, and the bookie runs the week through Monday night, the Monday night game would be, I call that catastrophe night, because that's the game where when you're betting 100 a game, you're down 500. You're going to bet 500 on the Monday night game just because you just don't want to pay, or you just believe I really like this game and I'm going to bet it and I'm going to get my money back. That's how come most people don't win. Like, people think that, oh, the casino's so big because nobody wins. No, some people win. I have other friends that win at this too. Of course, they work hard and they're disciplined too. But they use a money management like you were talking about in the beginning as well. And if you don't use these things, then you're not going to win. I mean, I'll give you an example. My friend's daughter had a wedding about a month or two ago. And one of the funny parts about that was that all the young kids, all the friends that were all in their early 20s, everybody's on their cell phone. And when I go home and I see my nieces, nephews, godkids or whatever, they're like, "Hey, Godfather," like they just wave to me, but they're on their phone. Usually it's playing video games, So he saw that they were all on the phone. He's like, "What are you guys doing on the phones or whatever?" And they're like, "Oh, we got bets on the game," So as soon as you get that first job and you're making some income, and now these states, it's legal, and you can't watch a game. Every commercial, or at least 4 out of 5, is basically DraftKings, FanDuel, MGM, whatever, with these promotions and sign up. Of course, I give a lot of credit more that the fantasy. I would almost prefer that guys played fantasy cards. Go in a league, even if you want to play against 20, 30, 50 other people and get a bigger payday. Play for 10, 20 bucks, something that, you're in action, you have action across the board, than to actually be betting on games, because that's a much more difficult process, especially at the one, with the VIG, the juice 110 to 100. And nowadays, all these sports books with the different, this is what drives me crazy too, the different bets of live betting or whatever. No matter what side you're taking, they're minus 120. Well, you can't win if you keep betting at those kind of odds. But people, again, it's a quick fix thing. Now, I'll tell you a funny story too, coming from New Jersey. You'd appreciate this one. When I was a young guy, my friend's uncle owned a deli. So they had an Italian deli, but they had lottery there. And in New Jersey, lottery is very big. Okay. So the lottery at that time, they had the picket number, and the pick 6 came and everything like that. So it was 8 o'clock at night, or 7:58. It came on TV. You could watch it.
Sure.
So 95% of the people that came in the door played the lottery. And then they had scratch off, rub off tickets. That was about 5% of the play. And when people would buy that, you're like, "What are you buying that for?" I worked there. Me and my friend worked the machine, and we were fast. We were good running the machine, so we could pump out tickets. But they were number 2 in the whole state of New Jersey. Well, when I go home now, and I ask them, "Hey, how's things going?" or whatever, and you know how quickly things have changed. Rub-offs are now 90% of the sales, and the lottery is 10% of the sales. And you'd say, "Well, how could that be? Why?" And the reason why is for the instant gratification. I want to win right now. I can't even wait till 7:58 tonight. I got to win right now. Now, of course, there's some nice juicy jackpots. And that's what makes it, interesting, that people you rub off, and rub-offs are $25, $50 for one rub-off, but you can win $1 million, or you win these crazy payouts. And that's what everybody's looking for. And that's kind of what happens a little bit with the sports betting. I think a lot of people just think somehow they're going to get rich. Did you see the story of the kid last week that hit the 4 team parlay where he picked the first guy to score a touchdown in each one of the 4 games.
And he hit 70 something odd thousand
for $5.
Yeah.
So it's different if you're just going to do that stuff for fun, $5, 10. That's not going to wreck you. But the fact is that also makes people believe that it's easy to do. But those 5s and 10s add up. So, you know, you have to be careful what you're doing.
How much research would you say, like, say, going into an NFL Sunday? I mean, it's tough because now you incorporate Monday night, Thursday night, but before there was really the Thursday night standalone game, Monday night was it. How much research would you typically do throughout the course of a day or a week? I mean, do you look at 3 or 4 games that you're comfortable with, and then you dive into that? And I'm also wondering, what do you take in consideration, you know, before you're making your pick, or you're leaning towards one direction or another?
There's a lot of factors. I mean, you have to look at, you know, the first factor is trying to look at how beat up the teams get last week. You know, like I'm big on defensive line matchups. I believe that that's where, you know, if somebody heard that 2 offensive linemen were going to be out other than these playoff games when it's really, really overblown, no one would even blink an eye because they don't even know who that player is.
Right.
But of course, if the quarterback or the top wide receiver or the top running back's out, all of a sudden, oh no, or the top defensive pass rusher, Nick Bosa's out, or something like that. Oh my God, that's big, which it is big, but people know that. So, you know, that's a factor. Of course, weather's a factor. Now, when I'm watching through the games. I watch game tapes all night long, all through the week that went on, say, Sunday. And I'm looking to see that how many guys walked off limping off or whatever. But I'm also looking at how the teams match up at certain things. So from one week to the next, a lot of people just bet off of last week. What you remember last week is what you're making a bet on. That's the worst thing that you could do. You want to almost stay away from that.
Recency bias.
Of course, but that it's normal. These are all normal things that people, when they lose, probably think, well, what, you know, they'll say to me, even if I gave that out, if it happened to be somebody that, I mean, Cincinnati's covered 10 weeks in a row. I mean, they're a good team though. And my philosophy is I do look at 2 things. I always look at the best teams to bet on first, but I'm also looking at the worst teams to bet against, because that's just as good and sometimes, not to say easy, but that's winnable. Because look, this is a key factor that I try to tell everybody. Bad teams, even on their best game, still lose because they're bad. Good teams to great teams can have bad days and still not just win, but cover that spread. Just because. And in the old days, it was much different too. In college football, you know, you didn't have the guys going all over the country. They were on the same 10, 20 teams. So they were loaded up. Their third stringers were better than the other team's first stringers. You know, I would do shows at the Stardust and say the average weight on this line of scrimmage for this offensive line is 321. And the defensive line that they were going against was 257. And that's because, again, they don't have the depth. Now, then you have an example where my friend coached at San Jose State, and San Jose State is the smaller schools. They don't have any fans. If you watch the game, they have like 50 fans, 100 fans. So they're not making any money off of it.
Right.
So what they have to do is what's basically just called the money game. They have to go to Alabama, take the payday for $1 million, $1.5 million, take the beat down,
get waxed.
And then they lose their 3 weeks in a row. But that's sports, not just the football, but the other programs as well. But a lot of times people don't quite understand that stuff. But I'm big on situational games. I mean, last night at college basketball, Arizona had lost against Washington State earlier in the year, which was a monumental upset. That was a huge upset. Then last night they come back, they're -4. They ended up winning by 5. It was 10 with like 30 seconds left. It got a little crazy at the end. But the idea is that's advantage spots. So you want to look to take advantage spots too. And that's really what I'm trying to do. I mean, back in the day, there was no information. No. There was no internet. There was nothing. The Stardust had a room, what was called the library, and they put sheets up on the board. And that's about all you had to go off of, you know, and other than if you had a skill to watch games and understand.
That's pretty fascinating. And then you get the aberrations where, you know, all of a sudden Rutgers beats Purdue, or Temple's a 21-point dog against Houston and they beat them, right? We've seen it in the NFL. it happens all the time. And again, Football Friday edition of BYP. Rich Quinones here. Gary Greene, Bluebook Sports Network CEO at Bet Vegas TV Radio Network. 30 plus years, handicapper, sports better experience. We're glad to have him for a couple moments. All right, so Championship Sunday, and we know when the quarterback gets banged up, the movement with the line, and it's kind of been fluid. And here we go, boom, boom, boom. Mahomes, the mobility. Now they're favored again as expected. I thought the move to Cincy +3 was, I think, a little the test of waters. It's come back down 1.5. I look at it like this. Ultimately, everyone will say, look at Joe Burrow. He's owned Kansas City. Mahomes is banged up. That's the novice, right? They're saying, oh, this is Cincinnati's spot. Now, granted, I took Cincinnati last week. I took them on the money line. I think they've been one of the most disrespected teams we've seen in recent memory to get to the Super Bowl and lose it. And the Rams won it, and they sold their soul to the devil, and they went out with a whimper. So there's two schools right there with those two teams, and one trending up and one trending out. I look at Cincinnati, and I don't believe they're playing with house money. I just look at, can you limit Patrick Mahomes? Can you frustrate him? Can you get to him? Can you win the battle within the trenches? When you look at line movement like this, because the quarterback has been injured and the mobility might be compromised a little bit, maybe he gets that shot, 6:30 kickoff, the adrenaline's kicking. Is it tougher to bet a game like this, or do you go back to your adage where you said, I look at the team that's the better team? That's the team I'm going to be more comfortable with if I'm going to bet.
Well, normally up until this week, or even say last week, you would look at that as a factor. But guess what? 4 of the best 5 teams are playing this weekend. And the 5th team was Buffalo, and of course, Cincinnati or Buffalo. One of them was going to lose. So basically, you can almost say that the 4 best teams are playing, because one or the other was going to win last week. The problem here is that just because it says title game, just because it says in 2 weeks Super Bowl, that doesn't make it some better game to be able to bet on. In fact, in the Super Bowl, I'll probably have 7 prop bets that I'll bet that I'll like 100 times more than the actual Super Bowl play that I'm making 8 out of 10 years. And that's because these teams are great. The head coaches are great. The offensive, defensive coordinators are pretty much great, okay? But the talent is great. Now, I would ask people this. When you go to the grocery store, do you buy the box of cereal that's all dented, or a can that's all dented, or do you push that aside and get the nice can or the nice box? You're not going to buy that dented can, right?
Damaged goods.
I love Patrick Mahomes. Okay, I love him. But that is a very serious injury. I had Kansas City on a few teasers last week, and I was so thankful that he came back into play. Now, they might have won without him. We don't know. I don't think so. They probably would have lost, but they won last year with the backup coming in. So you have to give credit there. It's a veteran guy. That's what you need. But the principle here is you have 4 great teams. I mean, you have Philly offense number 3 against San Francisco number 2 defense. You have San Francisco number 5 offense, Philly number 1 defense. I mean, the only lacking is Cincinnati's offense number 10 versus Kansas City defense number 10. And the only reason Cincinnati's number 10 is they have a great run pass mix for the most part. Cincinnati has the most underrated across the board offense, wide receiver, tight end corps in the league. I mean, people just don't understand. These guys are fantastic players, and you have to have that, but you have to have continuity, and they've had it. And I've been doing this for 34 years. Okay, I really was a young guy when Joe Namath did what he did in the call in the Super Bowl and all that. I've never seen a quarterback or any player, maybe in any sport, more confident than Joe Burrow. And people may call that cocky, but I believe that that's a key, that's why this team is so successful, just like Patrick Mahomes is basically almost the same. But he's not quite as cocky. Yeah. Patrick Mahomes is a totally different breed. But the fact is that they have pretty much the X factor, which is very rare to have. But now you have, again, the 4 best teams. So there's a lot of give and take, and I'm hoping that the weather's okay. It's funny that you guys back there, Philadelphia, the weather's going to be 51 degrees on Sunday. That could have easily been 12. Right. And that makes it a totally different ball game there too. Last week, the snow, Didn't really affect, per se, the game with Cincinnati and Buffalo, but in a way, sometimes it can. Sometimes play calling gets changed
Well,
a
that
little
was
bit.
it. Buffalo threw too many times. They never ran the ball.
Yeah, but Buffalo, they ran out of gas. They had a rough the Hamlin situation. Yeah, that's a terrible situation
I
to go
believe
through.
that. And people were arguing with me on my show because I said the emotional element, yes, you have something to play for and fight through. But after that ball is kicked off, that's it. You still have to win the game within the game, the X's and O's. And I mean, look, you're right. I just think, it's almost like you're going on fumes and all of a sudden. And quite frankly, I think there's something to be said with Brian Daboll going from Buffalo to New York, helping Daniel Jones cut down the turnovers. And you look at Josh Allen without him, and he's throwing some really bad red zone picks. So,
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure. I mean, I'm not a big Dak Prescott fan, but there's so much pressure on these poor guys. I mean, you can lose 1 year, 2 years, but then it becomes pressure. There's even a little bit of pressure swinging Kansas City's way right now because they've lost 3 times to Joe Burrow.
that's right.
I mean, I just look at it and just say to myself, wow, these are going to be, they should be really great games. There's one disadvantage going into this weekend, and that's San Francisco. Even though Purdy's run the table, no doubt about it, the kid's been sensational since he's been in there. It's a well-coached team, a different scheme. The scheme is harder. It's like the Army Navy. If you don't scheme against that every week on defense, when you finally see it, it could take you a half to get going. But the kid hasn't committed turnovers, and that's key. He's played, though, at home for 2 home playoff games. Now he's going across the country to play at Philly, and I'm sure you've been there. Philadelphia, is going to be a very tough environment. Their 2 running backs are a little banged up right now. I'm sure both will play, but when you have those kind of injuries, one good hit could knock them out, and then they're going to have to put a lot more pressure on him passing the ball. But the other 3 teams basically have veteran quarterbacks. Okay, it's one thing to talk about a great defense, but you also need that. Dallas had a pretty good defense, but if the quarterback's going to make mistakes, Buffalo had a great defense all year. But one thing for people that are looking at the Cincinnati factor, remember this: when they played Buffalo, when Hamlin got hurt, they had the ball in the first drive. They went right down the field and scored.
Yep.
So that was with a fresh, sharp Buffalo team. So maybe just you got to give extra credit. Cincinnati is very, very good. To win at Arrowhead is unbelievably hard. They did it last year. It's a shame to see Patrick Mahomes being hurt, but it is what it is. It's football.
And if you caught Cincinnati when it flashed at +3 and decided, hey, you know what, let me tease that and bookend it with the second game, that's not bad. I mean, that's having a little patience, catching at the right time. And to your point with the 49ers, with the Eagles laying 2.5, I think that's fair value right now. 49ers 125, Philly -145. I think the total is 46, juice to the over. I look at, again, the game within the trenches, right? You mentioned the running backs. They're banged up. McCaffrey sometimes goes out on 3rd down. They're going to have to give Debo his touches. The difference in this game, to me, is that the Eagles are a really good team. I mean, I just think people, for some reason, just don't want to give them their just due. I'm a diehard Giant fan. I have to be objective. They're a really good team. And when Hurts went down and he was rusty and this and that, you saw exactly what they did when they have a full complement of players, what they did against the Giants last week. They could have put up 45, 50 in that game if they wanted to. They got a good mix of running backs. They got the X factors in the tight end in Green, in Brown, the wide receivers in Smith, and then Goddard. The only thing that would concern me is when San Fran goes against quarterbacks that can run a little bit, Fields and Mariota were pretty much the 2 that I highlighted when I did my research. They had some success with the RPO.
And that's going on for a couple of years now.
Correct. And Jalen Hurts can do that a little bit. I think that's going to be the difference. And I don't know, like you mentioned Purdy, everyone's waiting for the other shoe to drop, but has Jalen Hurts really played in big spots too?
Well, I thought last year in the playoffs, he did well in his first year in this. They didn't win that playoff game, but I thought I look at young kids and Daniel, I don't blame the Giants. I had the Eagles as a best bet last week. I said this is the end of the road for the Giants. Okay, great coach, great all this.
You would have told me that on Friday.
Well, but the fact was that you now Philadelphia is now back to live. What happened the week before, even though Hurts played, it wasn't the same. But last week, Hurts only ran one designed run play.
Yeah.
They were not getting him hurt in that game. And of course, they had 14 nothing like that.
Yep.
There's no reason. Even when he ran the one he did, I'm like, what are you doing? I'm not even an Eagles fan. I'm a Redskins fan, Comanche fan, whatever you want to call them now. but you know, my family's an Eagles fan, so I'm rooting for the Eagles for the most part there. But Jalen Hurts is like Lamar Jackson. It's like these other guys. When you can run the ball, if you can't stop that run, you're dead. DOA. It's not going to happen. But, you know, everybody talks about Hurts. The Philadelphia Eagles defense has 72 sacks.
They're incredible.
That's insane.
They're incredible.
They're number one by gigantic margin, and that's what makes a difference. I mean, San Francisco puts pressure, but you did hit the nail. And in fact, it's funny because you know, I had a prop bet. I'm not big into the prop bets and everything, but I still go into, when I'm watching game tapes, I'm making notes. I don't even know what the prop bet's going to bet, but I have my notes. And I noticed, you know, and I've had San Fran a lot. Again, a good team. I've been on them. But when you rewatch a game, you have to be objective. If you make a bad play, you have to say, what did I do wrong here?
Yeah.
And in San Francisco's case, they've actually just outlasted a few teams. But the fact is that the San Francisco has given up big plays to receivers. And part of that is that they'll blitz the linebackers. They go all in. So when it works and you see Bosa, you know, getting that sack, a lot of times it's not just because of Bosa. It's because they started coming up the middle everywhere, and he's just the fastest one around the end, and he's going to get you. But the bottom line is that they've given up some big pass plays. So if you look at this situation, there's three prop bets that stuck out to me real quick. Hurts, longest completion over under 39.5. Okay. So how's he going to do it? He's got Brown over 25.5, and then he's got Devontae Smith over 24.5. So if it was going to happen, it's probably going to happen to one of those two guys, right? Obviously, you have a situation with San Francisco's defense that we know, again, number 2 defense. So you look at that, you're like, oh, they don't give up any big plays. They gave up a 46-yard pass for a long pass, a 50-yarder, a 60-yarder, a 51-yarder, and a 77-yarder. And you'd say, well, how come that good defense can do that? That's what happens if the offensive line protects.
Correct.
Okay, if they can just give that extra second, and we've seen, and the thing that I have this memory that just I've watched it so often. But you bring up Brown. Brown was the best free agent pickup, other than McCaffrey too, later in the year, that I've seen in 5 years. Brown is an absolute superstar. And when you get superstars in trades, you stole. Stephon Diggs, you stole. Now, Jefferson became the pick in place of Diggs, so it works out a little bit. But the bottom line is that you have Brown, and Brown runs the delay, cuts back across. If you're open, the linebacker that's back there, the safety that's back there is probably not going to cover him, and Hurts throws a nice ball. I can see the 40-yard pass happening, and then, of course, the over 25.5. Now, you'd probably have to hit both of those receivers because it could be either one. And he's done it to both of them. Yeah. Both of them have capabilities of doing that. But that's just something that's happened. It doesn't matter. San Fran could stop everything else, but occasionally they're going to get burned. And they're prop bets that are relatively pretty good. The problem with prop bets is I look immediately at these prop bets, and in fact, I'm going to give it a little tip for when the Super Bowl is going to happen. The prop bets they started out with 50, 100, now they're up to like 1,000, maybe even thousands. It's a booklet. It's like a Bible. You go pick it up, and you're like, oh my God, I got to look at this now for a whole day. But you have to make the bets you're going to make on the first day that they're out, because all that happens is they quickly start going 110, 120, 130, 150, 170. You look on there for some of these things right now. You can't bet the prop bets for 170.
No
then
value.
You can't lose any other bets.
Yeah.
And it's no different than why people ask me, well, how come you don't really do baseball? How come you don't do hockey? Hockey's my least sport. But those sports have high lines. Baseball pitchers, of course, we're betting the pitcher, right? But 330, if I lose that game, I got to win the next 4 games just to be up less than a unit. So you can't lose too many games doing that. And that's where the parlay action starts to come into play, which again, the casino loves. But that was the one prop. And the other thing, that I do a thing all year, and this really is something that if you don't do anything as far as handicapping, if you came to my site, I did all the work for you, so you don't even have to do the work. But I call it tired defenses, and as you get later in the year, they're not just tired, they're banged up. These guys are playing. These guys are elite athletes, but trust me, if you went out and got hit by a car, you wouldn't walk for about a month. They get hit by a car 5 times a week, basically, and they still get up and just keep on playing, take an ice bath for a whole Monday, and somehow they're back out there. God bless them. But the fact is that rested defense. Now look at this. Philadelphia last week played only 47 plays on defense.
Yep.
The starters probably were in there for like 37 of them plays for the most part. The week before they were off, they couldn't go into a game more healthy and rested.
Good point.
And now you have San Francisco. They played 2 games and they're coming across country.
Yep.
In the old days, the cross country factor was huge.
Brutal.
Time zones different. Listen, I fly home to New Jersey and I lose the hours, but just the time difference, it takes me like 2 full days. It wasn't this way when I was younger. I'm almost 60 now, so it's a little rougher. But it's amazing how there's no difference to these players. Yeah. You know, they're still young guys, but it still does. Your body has to get acclimated. And at one time, teams used to be like 80% losers going across country.
Sure.
And it's a terrible thing. The league should never allow some team coming West Coast to East Coast to play a morning, or I call it a morning game because it's 10 o'clock here.
Right.
But it should never happen, but it happens. And that's really a problem. It's no different. And how did the Miami Dolphins late in the season play 3 road games in a row?
Yeah, it was pretty. Yeah, we've seen it before. I mean, a couple of years ago, the Eagles had 4 straight NFC East games, and I think 3 of those 4 were on the road as well. I mean, yeah, but then you can, it's an argument.
But I mean, it's funny, but you have to take those things into accountability when you're making bets. But a lot of people just forget it, or just because maybe they won those games, eventually that toll could take its toll.
Yeah, absolutely. Short week, going to London Thursday night. All right. So it seems as though you're leaning towards the Eagles. And
right now, I mean, again, if you want to give, I got home field, I'm going to have good weather. So when you have a better team, you don't want weather to be a problem.
Right.
You know what I mean? If you had Buffalo last week, you don't want to see snow.
No.
That wasn't conducive to your bet.
And
that could only hurt you.
AFC side?
The AFC side, I'm still struggling with it. I mean, normally I would have just, at this point in the year, I would have just directed right to the over and just said, look, these guys, they've played all year. They've saved. Andy Reid is a trickster. He's got 3 tricks plays in his bag.
Right.
The guy's genes. It's funny. I was looking up the ages before. It's a totally different game, though. You have Sirianni, I think, is like 42. Taylor's 39, and even Kyle Shanahan, who's been coaching, I think, as long as I've been betting somehow, but he's only 42 or 43 years as well. So, this new regime, I give a lot of credit to the offensive and defensive coordinators, to the defensive coordinators for the Eagles and the Bengals have just, the schematics have been just dead on. Yeah. And sometimes teams can really get into a zone where they're just the guys calling great plays. And it's a magical thing. I mean, these guys have the hardest job. I always kid with people. I say the hardest job in the world is building bridges. Okay. That's the hardest job. You wouldn't want that job right back in the day when people going up there. That's too risky.
There's not a lot to be desired with that.
That's number one. But then military, police, fire, of course, that's your life's on the line every day. Professional sports bettor, I would put number 3. You know how they always say, don't try this at home. My advice is don't try this at home. I almost wonder, even at times, where I say every time my friends say, well, when are you going to retire? I always say 55. And then when 55 can't, I say, but I'm still young. Okay, 60 years old. But do you want to put in the grind? If you're willing to put in the grind and you have a skill of being able to watch game tapes, you understand. There's guys, that's why we brought up earlier about experts, right?
Right.
When people say the word lock, run, write down their name and do not ever, and run, because that means that they're just a con artist for the most part. You never say that word. There's no such thing as a lock. That's number one, and you learn that quickly, of course. But they're experts, so I guess they can be able to, to say it. But it's just bad for betting in general. And these books and shows that do this, it's just, you're actually doing a disservice to the bet.
I agree.
You just want the bettor to stay. You don't need to take his whole bankroll in the first or second week. Let him bet. He's gonna lose. If everybody could do this, everybody would do this. But the 110 to win 100 vig means you got to win 53% just to break even. And I have friends I've taught them everything, and they're pretty good at it. And the reason they're staying alive, in fact, I have customers, even their wives. A lot of times it used to be men. Now women are starting to bet too. They say 42% of bettors are women. I don't believe that, but I don't have it in my resume of clientele. But the idea is that even the wives will say, hey, you know what? I appreciate that you keep my husband in check. You know what I mean? Because I can win. I'm on a big run this week in college basketball, and newbies that I got on the radio show 3 weeks ago, they're like, hey, should I bet more? And you're like, why? Why would we bet more? Today's game's no different than it was 3 weeks ago. If it's a best bet, it's going to be worth a little bit more. But the fact is that's where people just don't understand. No. Oh, but you're hot. I say, but that doesn't matter. I'm actually 0-0 every night when the night starts. So you try to teach that to people and hope that they follow it.
Only as good as your last bet. We've come a long way since Jimmy the Greek would sit up there in the NFL Today and never really give the line per se and just say, I like the Giants as a touchdown or better favorite, because it was so frowned upon. Now, as you mentioned, there's going to be a day, because I broadcast sports as well. I know there's going to be a day down the road where you're not only calling the game or the play or the action, but you're also sprinkling in how the line just moves.
And they're doing it. It was deceiving. They snuck it in there about 4 or 5 years ago with Musburger or Al Michaels. And I used to be like, what's the big deal? And the leagues were so against it.
It's the elephant in the room. The NFL's in bet. Everyone knows that. Oh, they turn around and they move a team to Vegas and they're pretending like, it's
and
just
now they're full on board because there's a lot of money being made with it. God bless them.
I got about a minute left as we close it out. Real quick, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, where do you think, and Derek Carr, I'll throw him into the mix. Where do you think they are next year?
I got to believe Aaron Rodgers is one of the two is going to the Raiders between Brady and Rodgers. One has to. The Carr situation is an interesting one. He's not elite, but he's very servable. And look, I say this about everybody. People don't understand the worst quarterback, number 32 in the NFL. If he has a great offensive line, Tom Brady last year, number one offensive line. 3 of the top 5 linemen, 3 of the 5 linemen, I should say, were top 5 at their position. Top 5. I don't think I've ever even remembered seeing that. But the fact is, what did he do? He lit it up, and they went far. This year, he loses. The guy goes to a new team. 2 guys get hurt instantly. All of a sudden, wow, he's old. No, he still passed for yardage. But the bottom line is, you got to have a good offensive line, and that's why I say that a lot of people don't look at that as a key factor, but it really is. But if you got Derek Carr on a team with he had the worst offensive line
and bad defense.
They're just running through you. Your extra pressure adds on to you. I wouldn't mind if my Commanders got Derek Carr. I wouldn't mind that. I don't like to give up a lot of draft picks for anybody, just because you need the draft picks are so key and so important. But if you get Aaron Rodgers on the Jets, he immediately gives them a huge, get one more good lineman in there, get one more top wide receiver. And people, look, how did the Patriots win all the time? The Patriots, you had Teddy Bruschi signing for $3 million a year when he was a star.
Yeah.
And if you can get 3, 4, 5 guys to do that and buy in, now the salary cap numbers, of course, these guys, if they really, really, truly wanted to win a Super Bowl, they would go just take 20 million and say, use that other 30 to get four really, really elite players. But we'll see what happens with that.
Where can everyone follow you? All the information with the Bluebook Sports Network and whatnot.
Okay. The website's GaryWins.com. That's pretty easy. GaryWins.com. When you come to it now, it's betvegas.tv. We tried to make it a little bit more to the Vegas setting, even though, it's legal now across the country. But BetVegas.tv, right now, the articles are at a lower point. I mean, during the year, I'm loading up articles, offense, defense, tired legs, everything that I could, so that I'm doing the homework so that you don't have to. If I could just help you along, regular guy, he goes to work, he's a plumber, he comes home, he doesn't have lots of hours. Got kids too that he's got to, play with and do schoolwork with, and then, put him to bed. And then what's he got? An hour, 2 hours. So if you came to the website for that, I mean, obviously, if you're not into any type of handicap, you don't want to waste 1 minute. And that's probably 80% of my clients, right? You don't want to do it. I let somebody else do my stock work. I'm not going to try to make money off of that. I don't follow. I have no idea what's going on. I'm not going to put the effort in. So how am I going to win? But I'm extremely good at college basketball. That's my favorite sport. January, February, my favorite sports, just because it's every day. And football is just really 2 days a week. Like I can only stress to people, like football, just because these are big games, or just because it's a Super Bowl in 2 weeks, that doesn't make it some bigger play.
Right.
Still just keeping, you might have a better play in a basketball game, than you have this weekend in football or in a Super Bowl bet. So just try to keep it in check. And again, stay away from the parlays. You cannot win. No chance, zero. You will not be a winner. It's nice to see the big jackpots, but that is no different than rubbing off a scratch off. If you happen to be the lucky one to win $1 million, that doesn't mean that you played a good game. You played a terrible odds game. It's like playing video poker. You're playing a terrible odds game, and when you win, good for you. I wish everybody to win. I don't root for anybody to lose, but you got to use money management, no parlays, and just use, like you said, the number one word: discipline.
Yeah,
discipline.
absolutely.
Discipline. It's like
Greene
that in
CEO.
everything in life.
Yep. Bet Vegas TV Radio Network, Bluebook Sports Network. Appreciate you jumping on a Friday, Football Friday edition of Back Your Play, my friend. I'm glad we got you on.
I appreciate it. My back east New Jersey guy. I'm a summer Wildwood guy, which isn't too far from Atlantic City, but I love New Jersey, just don't like the winter time. So I'm fortunate to be off all summer. I'll get home and visit. We'll have to get together for lunch. I'll shoot down Atlantic City and definitely have lunch with you. But I appreciate you having me on. And I always say this to everybody, but I hope all your wagers are winning ones, and just never bet what you can't afford to lose. You'll be okay.
Good stuff, Gary. Appreciate you, pal.
Thank you, buddy. God bless.
You too.
Have a good